Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Sean Wood All Good podcast. Thank you for tuning in again. I'm really enjoying how easy this is becoming to set up. I love this new format. It just gives me the ability to have some ideas, get some notes down, and just turn on the microphone and riff it out, put the idea down, and then get some feedback by you guys on what you think about the topic. I am not particularly claiming to be right with the things that I'm saying. I actually love feedback and any critical feedback, to be honest. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you to the few of you that have messaged me about the podcast. And yeah, we're going to jump into today's episode. So today's episode, we are talking about the reality of becoming or being a pro athlete in the parkour community. And this was a discussion that I heard Giles and Keelan having on the Modus podcast. I love what they're doing. Shout out to the boys. Kind of inspired me to get more consistent on this whole thing. So thank you. But yeah, they were having a conversation. Keelan's recently had to get a sort of side gig. I don't particularly like the word side hustle. Everything seems to be a side hustle these days. So yeah, he had to get work, basically. Some part-time work. And to be honest, that's the reality for a lot of people who are considered parkour pro athletes. We're not quite at the point yet for all of the pro athletes to just be living off parkour. Even, I've heard some of the Red Bull athletes, some of the top athletes don't actually make enough money to live off it, full time. They get sort of salaries, and on the high end, I think a couple of the guys are probably living off it. But for even there, there's a bell curve within the Red Bull athlete ecosystem, and not all Red Bull athletes are equal when it comes to pay. You kind of have to work yourself up the chain within that ecosystem. And so even at the top, it's the dream to be a Red Bull athlete, but even the reality there is it doesn't mean you're going to be able to just live off parkour. Probably other perks that come with that. You get a bit more work and you can charge day rates and that sort of stuff with it, but still not a sure thing. So I guess for a period of time, I could have been considered, quote unquote, a pro athlete. I kind of went a different route. I wanted to do parkour full time, so just created a business with my friends, and we called ourselves pros. There was a couple other teams at the time that were doing the same thing. Tempest had their pro team, and they were doing it pretty well. They were pros, and Storm probably had a pro team as well. And Story Boys were sort of already doing the rounds, but they were doing it on very little amounts of money. But, they were living off parkour, I guess. And there was some amazing opportunities that I got during my time of being able to do parkour sort of full time. Probably the best memory and opportunity I had was to travel the world on sponsors' money. This was something that I could never have imagined at one point. And we were really lucky that we picked up a German backpack company. Some of you older guys might remember Fast Break Bags. Ennis from Ashigaru had a connection there, and he built a team based around people that he wanted to get on the team. And we got Anan and Jason on the team as well, or he got Anan and Jason on the team. And that was really the way that we lived the first couple of years on Farang, or at least I did. That was my stream of revenue. And at that point in time, without inflation, Thailand was an expensive place to live. So I was able to basically live off that sponsor. But then we got a couple of projects off them, and some projects off Razer Gaming, the guys that make the headphones and that. We got a couple of cool projects during that time with them. And then Jason was doing the Red Bull thing, and we got a couple of gigs with him. So this ability to sort of travel on sponsors was was one of the perks of being, you know, a pro athlete. And that was definitely the Farang, being under the Farang umbrella definitely helped make that happen, and having those associations with those guys. I guess because of the hustle and the way it was done, I did learn a lot of vital skills that have translated into the real world. You know, because Farang was at the point then when we were having to do everything ourselves, learned filmmaking and marketing. They were the main skills that I sort of picked up from my time there. And I'm going to brush on this a little bit later in this episode, and then in a follow-up episode. This is a really important skill of being a pro athlete this day and age at the moment. I guess my time, and this is from my perspective and where it was when I was at, like, the whole Farang experience for me was the equivalent of me. It was my uni degree, right? It was my apprenticeship. Because we were running the business ourselves, I didn't have a traditional education, but this was the way that I learnt the skills that I'm now using in the real world. Really laid the foundation for who I am now, when it comes to skills and the outlook that I have with the world. One thing I think parkour and the ability to call myself a pro, something that brought into my life was, and this is probably something that I haven't really brushed on before, but it was just a really cool tool of connection. So parkour is still cool enough and still new enough that, like, when you meet someone, you say, yeah, I do parkour full time, you know, that is a great icebreaker into new friendships and relationships that you make. And just using that alone has been something that's gotten me into some crazy situations to hang out with people that I never thought that I would hang out with, and probably would have nothing to do and not want to associate with me if it wasn't for this, like, hey, this guy does parkour. This guy's like a pro parkour athlete, you know? There's a couple of big DJs that I could call my friends, and like the original meetings with them, you know, was they thought I was cool because I did parkour professionally. And I think that's cool, you know. I think it's cool that people think parkour is cool. And, you know, I've showed up on Snapchats and Instagram stories of all type, been pulled on stage before with DJs, huge DJs, to do flips and to be like, yeah, this guy's a pro parkour athlete. So that's, I guess that's a perk of being a parkour pro. I reckon it's probably like that being a pro skater as well, because that's what is really cool. And they're sort of pop culture as well, so they're usually household names anyway. But yeah, I guess that's one of the perks. But it is really hard, and this is what Keelan was talking about in the episode, in a sense of he's had to go and work at a supermarket, and sort of take on side work, you know, late night work, which really starts to affect on his training. And I guess that's not when you're a young kid thinking about being a pro at something. It's not what you think you're going to have to do to make that happen. A very small percentage of people that can do it without a side hustle. And it got me thinking about it, you know, when I was sort of coming up, all the jobs that I had to do, you know, about 15, I found parkour, and I was already working at that age in a supermarket. And there was nothing established at that time, so I was working, and at about 17, I finished school, and I went and got a construction job. Got paid really, really good money to do that, and I saved up, and that kind of funded the first couple of years of me traveling the world. Anna and I did some epic trips, and that's where I got solidified. That's where I decided this is what I want to do. Then that money sort of ran out, and I was kind of back and forth to Thailand with Anna, and then went and got a job at a bank. I was a banker for a while. A lot of people think that's quite funny. Can't really see me as a banker. Then I went back to a supermarket, started selling insurance. I've worked selling cameras. And a lot of this was actually once Farang had started. You know, I didn't really ever not have to work on some capacity. There was maybe a year or two there when I was just focused on only Farang. And that was really cool. That was a very fun period of time. I got to see what that would be like. But outside of that, I was always working and doing like what I was doing was 3 to 4 months at a time, and then going on the trips when I could make them. And I think this is something that some people should take into consideration. Not so much that you're going to have to work on the side, but if you do want to get picked up by a pro team, one of the sort of 5 to 6 options that you would have these days is that I think a lot of people do think that just being skilled at parkour is going to get you picked up by a team, and it's not necessarily the case. What I've noticed and what's been talked about a little bit is that what it kind of takes to be picked up by one of the pro teams at the moment, whether it be someone like Modus or Farang, Storm, is a little bit of an extra skill, because these companies are still sort of self-sufficient. They're being run internally, not a lot of outsourcing going on. If you're really good at parkour and you're also really good at using a camera or really good at editing or designing clothes, there's lots of examples. Look at Zen in Farang, or Keelan in Modus, or Jason in Farang, and Anand doing a lot of business stuff in Farang. And I believe so even in Storm now. These extra skills are what can be the tipping point for someone to say, yeah, this guy's worth picking up, because then you add value to the business. You help build the business in a way that there might be an expense of paying you a wage to do it. I mean, Story is built on this. They're all filmmakers. I don't think they could do it without them all being filmmakers. There's no way they could do the capacity of content that they put out if they weren't all able to edit. And that's very unique about them. So I think it is very important to be a great athlete, but also to have another strong skill that you can bring to the business. And I think, later on, once you may, get into more of a position I'm in now, like where no longer a pro athlete, those skills that you've gained also become useful. You're not ending your parkour career and going, okay, what do I do now? That happens with a lot of popular sports, like big sports like basketball, or you hear about these a lot. If someone gets injured during their career and they've been training since they were a kid and they don't really know anything else within their worldview, and then their career ends and they go, wow, what am I going to do now? And that's maybe one of the advantages that we have and where we're at right now. We learn to be very, what would be the word, resourceful with our skill set. And so it is really hard to do at this point in time. But this is changing. And as these by parkour, for parkour businesses start to grow, we are starting to see some scenarios where people can live purely off parkour. And this is only going to grow more as these companies start to expand. This is why it is so important to support parkour brands. And I guess what we do hear online quite a lot with a couple of the bigger brands is people complaining about the clothing and the products being so expensive. And because these companies are not able to currently order the types of quantities that would allow you to drop the price, right? A lot of the time with these factories, the more you spend, the lower the price or cost per unit goes down. And if companies are at the point right now where they're ordering like 250 to 500 pieces per piece, or units per piece, they're still going to be, they're not a super big priority to these factories that they're dealing with. So if we as the community continue to support these brands, we do purchase the new products when they come out, then that is going to give more revenue to these businesses and get them into a position where they will be able to pay their athletes a full-time wage. And so when it is very easy to go out and find a shoe for $40 that you could train in, or go and buy the Storo 10s or the Farang Elevates that may be $100, I mean, for me, I'm going to choose the parkour brand at this point all the time. And I think this discussion is worth having. And I do like this tone that a lot of the big brands have at the moment, where they support each other and they support each other's products, and a lot of the time post other teams' products. And I think this is really healthy for our community. And yeah, I mean, I guess I just wanted to make this episode to talk about that and put it out there that at this point in time, if you are trying to become a pro athlete, it is a hard slog, but I think it is worth it. I've had I've done it on a very low level. I got a couple of years where I was able to do parkour full time, and it was the best years of my life. I wouldn't regret or take back a single one of those moments. It is something worth thinking about if you are thinking about doing this as your full-time gig or you're striving towards that. And I think it's important to know that it is vital to branch out and try and find some other skills at this point in time. This is going to change. We are the ones that are going to change it, and talking about it is the first step. So that's all for today's episode. I do have a follow-up episode about how some of the skills that I learned, as I mentioned in this episode, I've learned so many vital skills, filmmaking, marketing, all of those types of things, who have made up the full package of who Sean Wood is now. And that's actually led to some really cool opportunities that were still in the realm of parkour. So in the next episode, I'll talk about that. So stay tuned for that. It's going to come out in probably 2 or 3 days from now. While I have your attention still, if you're still listening, thank you so much. Go and give me a follow on Instagram or Twitter. Want to help? I really want to start building a bit of a Twitter community. It's a good place for back and forth dialogue. YouTube, going to be trying to get that off the ground soon. And I'm really enjoying these. Thank you for listening, and I will see you. No, I won't. I will speak to you next time. You.